My son passed out and had a large bruise on her face because his teacher refused to send him to the nurse's office and repeatedly yelled at him. So I gave her a dose of her own medicine and made her cry. Last Thursday, I got a call from my son's school telling me I needed to come and collect him because he had passed out during class. My son has passed out a good few times before, so we've made sure he knows what to do when he starts to feel faint to make sure he doesn't hurt himself. However, when I arrived at the school, my son was holding an ice pack to his head. When I asked about it, the nurse told me he had hit his head when he fell. I wondered why he hadn't laid down like we taught him. I brushed it off and decided to ask him about it later, as he was still kind of out of it. The next day, I asked him about it, and what he told me made my blood boil. When my son first started to feel like he was going to pass out, he tried to tell his teacher. When he stood up to talk to her, he was immediately yelled at to sit back down. The next time he wanted to tell her, she told him he didn't look sick and wasn't allowed to go to the nurse's office. Then, his class was doing an activity that required standing for practically the rest of the lesson. Before the activity started, my son, yet again, told this teacher that he felt like he was going to pass out and asked if he could sit the activity out. The teacher responded by yelling at him, claiming he was just being lazy and was making excuses. My son's friend was getting worried about him, so he told the teacher, who then started yelling at his friend, accusing them both of trying to get out of the lesson. Not even a minute later, my son passed out, and according to his friend and a couple of other classmates, she acted very shocked, as if she hadn't been ignoring him trying to tell her how he felt for the last 5 minutes. I'm extremely worried about the impact this will have on my son, as when the fainting first started, he didn't tell any of his teachers as he was scared that they were going to yell at him. This resulted in quite a few injuries from falling. It has taken a while for him to start telling them when he's feeling faint, and I'm afraid this incident will cause him to stop asking, and he will hurt himself. I wanted to go to school that day, but my son had stayed off, and my wife hadn't been home from work yet. The following Monday, I arranged an appointment with the principal. After I explained what had happened, he called in my son's teacher, who then tried to deny the fact that he ever told her anything and that he had just randomly collapsed. This is where I may be a TA. By this point, I was pissed. I began to scream at her, yelling about how my son could have gotten hurt. I was so pissed I hadn't even noticed that she'd started to cry. By that point, I was asked to leave by the principal. My wife and some of my friends think I'm in the right, but my parents and the other half of my friends think I went too far. I don't know about this one. What do you guys think? Am I the a-hole?
My mother-in-law told my daughters that she hoped that I would die so they could be with her, so I had my mother-in-law removed from our lives and got her arrested. I was in a car crash. I had to be cut out of the car. I wasn't seriously injured though, thankfully, but the other person unfortunately wasn't doing too well. From what I saw before I was taken away to the hospital, I was told to stay in the hospital overnight to see if I suffered from a concussion. I rang my husband and told him what happened. My mother-in-law got the incidents mixed up when he dropped off our daughter, 6,11, to my mother-in-law while he rushed to see me. The next morning, my husband brought our daughters to get while I was waiting to be discharged. Upon seeing me, my 6-year-old busted into tears and said, "I don't want you to die." I comforted her and said I'm not dying, and I was very lucky. She then said Granny said she hoped I die so that they and my husband can come live with her. My husband and I were shocked. My 12-year-old confirmed she heard her say that. My husband said he was going to ring mother-in-law. When he came back into the room, he looked furious, but he didn't say anything until after we got home, and he said mother-in-law denied it after he kept pushing. She ended up admitting it, but she said she didn't mean it. I thought me and her were close, but I guess not. I am incredibly hurt she would want that and said I wanted me and the girl to go no contact with mother-in-law. I told him he could have a relationship with her, but I didn't want me and the girls to have one with her. My husband said he supports me. He then rang mother-in-law and told her what I said. She didn't take it too well. She came to our house crying and said it was a misunderstanding. She didn't mean it, and we were taking it the wrong way. My husband asked, "What did you mean then?" She just got hysterical and started crying and saying she always wanted daughters. Still, my husband was the only child due to her inability to have any more after him, and the girls were more like her daughters than granddaughters. She wasn't thinking properly when she said that to our 6-year-old. She got so worked up that my husband had to take her home. When he got back, he said he didn't know she felt like that and asked if I still wanted to cut her off. I said yes. He said okay and didn't argue. But it's been a week now, and he is still very quiet and hasn't said much about what happened. Now I'm starting to feel guilty, wondering if I took it the wrong way in being Ada. Update. I decided to talk to my husband and asked if he was upset that I decided that the girls and I have no contact with mother-in-law. He said he wasn't. He said he always knew mother-in-law wanted a daughter instead of him, and it brought back all the bad memories of rejection and hurt he felt growing up as a kid. I suggested therapy, and he's willing to go. We are also going to get therapy for our 6-year-old, as she now gets anxious if I'm not within her sight. My husband agreed that going NC with mother-in-law is the best thing for our family. Our daughter's birthday is coming up, and we have yet to tell mother-in-law she is no longer invited. Update 3. Mother-in-law has been arrested. She came to our house screaming we couldn't keep her daughters from her. Husband tried to calm her down and get her to leave. She wouldn't and attacked him. My husband had to restrain her, and I called the police. She fought them, but it got her nowhere except the back of their car. The woman is truly insane. My husband talked to the police because I had to calm down my daughters. After all, they witnessed the whole thing. My 6-year-old was hysterical about Granny being taken away. This is all just a big mess.